but yet what is better overall for the child? At the same time, the neighbor lady might say, what about me? They're not doing as well as they should with that child. But yet, real love is really doing what's best for the child. All right, now let's slow down just a little bit and let's go into number 3. I have to have an actual knowledge, a conviction that I need the 7 A's, which is acknowledgement, acceptance, approval, appreciation, admiration, adoration, and affection. Now, how much do I need them? My sanity is based on my receiving an ample supply of the 7 A's. Now, do I really need them? Now, some people think that the male role is supposed to be some strong giant that doesn't need anything. Now, if you feel this way, you build some type of a dictator without love. Now, will he have people who will submit to him? No, in other words, now, what if I really know that I am complete and I am in my position, I know who I am, I know where my authority comes from, and I feel the delegated authority in my position, and still I know what? I need every other human being, and I need all the love that they can give me. Now, the very knowledge of need allows fulfillment of need. Now, if I say I don't need you, can I accept appreciation from you? But if I say tonight I really need you, does it really feel good when you tell me thank you? Isn't it simple to realize that I have to admit I need the 7 A's before I can be satisfied? All right, now let's go back to our affectional field diagram. And you remember the namby-pamby affectionate assistant who only can have the 4 A's. That person, if you ask them, do you need to be admired? Do you need to be adored? They will tell you, no, I'm not good enough. In other words, we're talking about the administrative assistant. Do they really feel like they deserve to be worshipped, to be adored, to be admired? No, then are they denying the top 3 A's as needs? All right, now will they be satisfied? No, if I don't need admiration, will I receive it? If I don't need to be adored, I won't receive it. And then I'll end up in the first 4 A's, which is the in-group feeling, which is no leadership, by the way. And a real man is a leader. Therefore, does a real man actually have a shortage of the top 3 A's, admiration, adoration, and affection? No. The very fact that he knows that he needs them, the need is then satisfied. So we say then that the 7 A's have to be a conscious need. All right, number 4. He's fearless. In other words, we have the epitome of courage here. It's interesting in reading the scriptures to try to determine what God loves. We find that he is in love with the Arabian horse. It's also interesting to find out why he likes this horse. And the reason is given that it is fearless. So this would lead you to believe that the man that God has sent to conquer the world, and by the way, he is taking over the world through man, this is his outreach, does he want this man to be completely absent of all fear? One of the things that I have found in counseling hundreds of couples, women detest men who are cowards. They can't stand it. They'll tell you, I love him, he's sweet, he's dear, he's kind. Why does he have to be so afraid of everything? And then I think she tries to make him appear brave by becoming more afraid, so there'll be a contrast. And we find her actually jumping up on a chair because there's a mouse. It's interesting to know that after he finally dies of a heart attack because he's totally failed his role, is she afraid of a mouse? No, she realizes 124 pounds is no match for 2 ounces. And she goes into battle and kills one. But while he's alive, she can't even put a fish worm on a hook. There's a noise in the bushes and she screams. When he's dead, she doesn't make a sound. She goes over and chases the dog away. In other words, she is trying to do what? She's trying to save him. In other words, she says, this is all I've got left, and I want to make a man out of it, and he's afraid of everything, so if I become more afraid, it'll make him look like he's a little bit of a man. Now, she might not know she's doing this consciously. This will be on an unconscious level, but she's really trying, isn't she? Let's look at a woman here for just a second. It'll give you more of an insight into a man. A woman, psychologically, has a craving in the very essence of her being to throw herself at the feet of a man as a living sacrifice. To actually have no rights whatsoever, to belong to him, and to spend her life looking and searching, trying to find out what his slightest whims, desires, opinions, and wishes are, and those become her commands. Now, this is all good and wonderful if she could find a hero that would be worthy of such a sacrifice. Well, what if there's none available? Does this take away this innate desire of hers? No, it's still there. So she searches and searches and searches to find this hero, and then she realizes there are none. So she finds the most likely prospect that she can convert into such an animal. Now, can you watch her working on him for 80 years? And by the way, if he hasn't died in the meantime and left her a widow, she gives up anyway. And she says, I think it's impossible. And then she has the process of doing what? Reconciling herself to the fact there's not going to be any man on a white horse. The knight is not coming. He never has, nor he never will. So, what's her consolation? Sons. We can't get a man out of this old man. Surely one of my boys will make it. Now, it's impossible for a woman to try to make a man out of a son if there's no father image. I'll tell you what will happen. In her efforts to make a man out of this little boy, she'll ruin him. In other words, it's not possible. She'll try and she'll try, but does he know who to look at to find out what to act like? No, there's no image. So we say then that he becomes less of a man than his father was. And what about the next generation of young girls? It's worse. So in other words, we're going to see before the night's over, we desperately need men. Now, when a man has no fear, we say he has life. Life is based on the absence of fear. In other words, I am courageous when I have no fear. When I have fear, I have lost the very essence of my own life. Now, if I have life, do I want involvement? Yes, this is what I crave. In other words, if I'm full of life, the next thing I want to do is be involved. And by the way, how far do I want to be involved? As much as it's humanly possible. In other words, would he actually say, I'm only having 2 children because that's all we can afford? He's not a slave to the dollar. If he wants 3 children, he has 3 children. I think the only criteria that would limit the amount of children he would have would be his wife's health. Because he's independent, he's free, he's a being that can walk up on the top of the hill and feel the wind in his face. I'm going to give expressions all the rest of the evening to help you feel this. I'm doing this very strongly tonight because I want to contrast the real man with what you'll go out and look at it tomorrow. We've used Christ off and on as an illustration of the male role. How much involvement did he particularly want? Well, they called him some bad names. They said he ate too much food and drank wine, didn't they? And he ran around with what kind of people? Ooh. Did he get involved? What did it cost him? All right, now how much should you be involved tonight? Clear to the hilt. In other words, don't hesitate at all. Don't pull back. Now, the minute you pull back, we say you have fear. Watch this close. In other words, if you think, well, I really should, and if I did, I probably could help, but I better not. Now, the minute you say, I better not, are you admitting inside of you there is fear? All right, now, can you play the male role and be afraid? Right now, if you're thinking about yourself, you might say, oh, I might get away with it. No, right now, look, if I had somebody who was ahead over you, how would you feel if one day you came in to get your orders and they were shaking? You say, what's wrong? I'm scared to death. Well, I need my orders for the day. Well, I can't think right now. Take the morning off and come back this afternoon. You come back that afternoon, they're drunk. They made an adjustment to their fear. Now, do you feel you've got a leader? In other words, do you feel that you can actually throw every part of your being in total submission to your head if he's scared? No. The minute my head begins to feel a little fear, I want a new head. This is the reaction. All right, now, if your wife hasn't given you the worship that you think a wife should give a husband, and you're shaking in your boots, have you got good reason why she's not? You say, well, what do you mean by being afraid? Well, you made a business deal, and you've got a feeling that it's not going to make it. If you're a real man, you'll smile and look relaxed and say, who cares? Can't win them all? Try again tomorrow. Now, if you're not a man, will you be afraid? You'll even be afraid to tell your wife. I'll tell you why. You'll be afraid that when you tell her, she'll not have as much respect for you, and you're going to lose her, or you'll have other kind of fears. Now, what if the business deal the next day, sure enough, it doesn't go through, and you cannot get your assets together, and you have to declare bankruptcy? All right, now, if you're a real man, what are you going to do? Now, watch me real close here and stay with me. Without any hesitation, go ahead and declare the bankruptcy. Are you bothered emotionally at all? No. Didn't turn out quite the way I want. Oh, you know what I mean by a shock absorber now? And because you're not hurt physically, because you're not hurt emotionally, are you able to pay everybody back dollar for dollar? In other words, are we saying tonight that could you fear anything? What's this expression? Throw out your chest, kick up your heels, and go through fire. Does that give you a feeling? All right, so you're going to take over, and your wife says, nope, if you take over, I'm walking out. You think, well, we're in a contest. She's pulled a particular bluff. Now I have to figure out, does she mean it or doesn't she? I think it's a bluff. So you take one more move to establish headship. She starts packing. Back off. Wasn't a bluff. She means it. I'm scared to death. So you go in, you say, honey, I want a truce. Whatever you want, you can have. All I want is peace. So she pulls out the paper all typed, hands it to you. This is the conditions of your surrender. So you look them over. You say, well, they're kind of demanding, but do you have a choice? Not when you're not a man, you don't. You hand it back and say, pretty rough. Okay. I'll try my best. I'll do everything you say there. Now, you don't know it, but you have lost your marriage more so than if she packed and walked out of the door. It's surprising. Some of you, the way you look at me, you're a little surprised. A real man, would he flinch and cower just because she had an emotional tantrum? What do you do when your kid gets down the floor and beats his head on the rug and yells and breaks the furniture and grabs all the glasses and throws them on the floor? You run out of the house, the neighbors, for help? And please, my kid just took over. And he told me I can't come back until I agree for 50 cents more allowance per week. I'm trying to make it humorous in a way, but I'm trying to get you to see the difference between somebody who's scared to death and someone who's a man. Now, there is going to be one more complication. If you've been afraid all your life and you've been married for 20 years, has she developed some very ingrained habits? If you turn around tonight and become a man, she's liable to miss her cues and do something she wishes later that she hadn't. So in other words, I would do it a little gradually. I would kind of let her know that I've changed. I am a man now, and I fulfilled a new position around here that's been vacant for many years. By the way, it is vacant, because if you're not the king, can she be? In other words, God didn't make you to function two ways. How many ways do you have tonight to breathe? Give me your alternatives, A, B, C, D, E. When you get down to the real basics in life, do you have very many alternatives? I'm amazed at how well it's laid out ahead of me. In other words, there's only one thing I breathe tonight, and that's oxygen. There's only one way that I can breathe it. All right, number 5. This being has to have a knowledge of role relationship. We've got several people in our society that are males that have grown up with good hearts, kind, full of love, but they do not know what role relationship is. Therefore, before they know it, they've gone into a contest with their wife. A businessman in a business. He wants to do what's right. He's got a good conscience. He's trying hard. But before he's turned around twice, he's in contest with his men. The reason for this is he's been reared in a home that has taught him that the way to obtain what you want is by contest. Therefore, he goes after what he wants by contest, which dehumanizes the victim that owns what he wants, and therefore ends any actual attempt that he could ever have for role relationship. So he ends up, for the next 20 years, fighting with his wife. And he's got a 50-50 chance, I suppose, of winning. But I don't believe in that anymore. The more I study marriages, the more I say a man has no chance of winning. His only hope would have been to fight on physical terms. And society has outlawed that, and how can he ever win an emotional battle with a woman? It's impossible. Only way that a man can actually be king in his own castle is to have a role relationship with his wife. Otherwise, he'll be dethroned before he has a chance to even move. If you do not have a knowledge of role relationship, you can live an entire married life not knowing who should be boss or what the rules should be or how things should be governed, and you can innocently contest. I think of people sometimes that we hire in our society today. It's amusing because the people you hire do not know what the female role is. If no one has been around to teach them what the female role is, they come to work for you, they've got some kind of a mixture, half female, half male role in their head. Do they know how to be submissive to the boss? Now, you've got to get in there and teach them. If you can't teach them, we call it turnover. You should look at some of the figures of turnover in some of the industries in America today. It would amaze you. In other words, I would say one of our great economic losses today in our society is turnover. In other words, we try them continuously in the front door, out the back door, and we find out they can't submit. They don't know what it means to submit. They have their own ideas. They go their own way. So we have to have then a knowledge of role relationship. And if the female doesn't know who she is, the employee, how is she ever going to find out who she is if the male doesn't know who he is? And how is he going to teach her when he doesn't know the difference in the roles? We should have a chair sometime when I'm doing a case on management consulting, when the boss doesn't know what the boss is supposed to be, when the employee doesn't know what the employee is supposed to be, then we call that confusion. Now, can you blame the employee? He hasn't had any place to learn, has he? And he has no strong male role to teaching. So what do? They end up and they fight. So we say then that you have to have a knowledge of a role. And by the way, if you don't have knowledge of a role, will you actually have the nerve to take over a role? Not especially if somebody's hanging on to half of it already. I mean, they've already staked their flag and claimed it. And if you're not really sure what the boundaries are with clear-cut knowledge, are you going to walk in there and say, this is my role, and this is what I'm going to do? No. All right, we're ready to go on to number 6. I am not able to play a male role until I have already successfully played a female role. Isn't that an interesting statement? Now, what do I mean? I mean that if you are not in total submission to your head, will you ever play a good male role? Well, first of all, if you're not in submission to your head, where's your authority? I can see by your expressions your understanding. In other words, if I'm not in submission, do I have any delegated authority from above me? then how in the world am I going to make my wife be submissive? By the way, I've almost answered the question, make her be submissive. In other words, I'm going to have to use demand authority. When I use demand authority, she retaliates with informational authority, and then I have a contest. So I really don't have actually a role relationship. Now, how submissive do you have to be to the role above you? Total, complete? Can you have one right? No. This is interesting. In other words, we're talking about the male role tonight. Before you can play the male role, you have to give up every single right to your boss. Your head has taken over totally, and you have absolutely no rights whatsoever. And now, what's your desire? To please the male role that you are under. Now, you want to find out that person's whims, desires, opinions, and wishes. And these have become your command. These are what you're living for now. In other words, your desire in this earth is to satisfy the head. Now, it so happens the head wants you to get a female role underneath you. Isn't this interesting? Did you realize that's your primary motive, to secure a female role? In other words, your motive for securing a female role under you is because the head above you has this desire for you to have a female role. In other words, this is the actual initial cause for role relationship. Oh, I love these statements. I've been looking for this for a long time. I've been wanting to know the initial cause of role relationship. It's only because my head wants it. Because my head wants it, then what am I going to do? Search out. Now, the reason I had trouble with this before is I couldn't find a proper motivation, because every time I get a female role, I've just got another problem. I couldn't figure out what's the male role's objective, because he's motivated contrary. No, he isn't. Your motivation doesn't come from within, it comes from your head. In other words, if I'm running this department and we need 3 more men, I go to talk to my boss, what does he want? He says, well, you set up the job descriptions, you set up the department, and you hire 3 more men. Now I'm going out to hire 3 more men because my head wants 3 more men. Why does a wife have a baby? Because the husband wants one. All right, now follow it up the chain of command and let's see if it works. Why does the husband want a baby? Does God want us to have children? We have a commandment, don't we? Replenish the earth. Are you following the chain of command? In other words, because the head wants it, then the next head wants it, then the next head wants it. Now what's the wife want? Got to have a baby. And by the way, it's interesting to know, you can always tell when you're working the law in its beautiful state, because does the people all the way down the chain of command have an instinct that agrees with the head? But once you realize that your head wants a female role, and all your buddies that have gotten married have all been divorced already, and you realize it's a dangerous assignment, what are you going to do when you understand what your head wants? You'll go ahead and get married, won't you? Then you turn around and you know all your friends have got all rebellious teenagers, and they're all paying the bills. Your head wants children, what are you going to do? Children. In other words, will the plights of contests around you stop you from setting up role relationships? By the way, this ties in beautifully. Does this eliminate the fear of involvement? Whether you realize it or not, having another child is involvement. If you're going to be a man, you're going to have power. Unlimited power. It's impossible to play the role of a male without power. Power comes from right role relationship with your own head. If I'm a supervisor working in this factory, I have power when I'm submissive to my own boss. In other words, I have authority. It's delegated authority. I'm in a position. The position has been given authority. And with this authority, I have power. But now the minute I am not submissive to my boss, will he stand behind me? No. Then where's my power? Let me give you an illustration. I've got a beautiful lamp. It's burning. I have power, do I not? Somebody kicks the extension cord. It's a sick-looking light, isn't it? It's dark. I can't find out even where I'm at. We say its source of power has come off. In other words, we say in practical terms, is the light submissive now? No, the extension cord's rebellious. We have to re-plug into the power. So if a man is going to have power to play the male role, he has to be in total submission to the one over him. This means a salesman has to be completely submissive to a sales manager. This means that an employee has to be submissive to the boss. This means children have to be totally submissive to the wife. This means a wife has to be totally submissive to her husband. And let's go one step further, a husband has to be submissive to God. To the degree he isn't, to the degree he's lost his power, and to the degree he cannot have power enough to rule his own castle. And he'll be dethroned, and little Junior can do it. You say, well, how can he do it? Little Junior can muster up informational authority, pull a judge role on a father, and strip him of positional authority before he's turned around twice in that home. Now, how old does Junior have to be to do this? 3 years old. So you see, the man has to be a man of power if he's going to rule. And his power comes from submission. There's probably one more reason why you should be in submission to your head, is because you're going to have an awful hard time having a female role underneath you submissive to you when you're not submissive to your own head. I mean, they're going to be afraid of you. All right, number 7. Somewhere along the line, I should feel a need for headship. Now, I would think that this would come directly after I feel my head wants me to have a female role. Should I also become conscious that within me is a basic instinct to actually assume the responsibilities of headship? All right, now this means that you love to be the head. In other words, tonight, just ask yourself, do I have a real feeling that I really love to be the boss? In other words, do I feel like I really want to assume the responsibilities that go with taking care of somebody else? Now, you should have this within you. There should be this feeling within you. And by the way, if you're afraid, will it kill this? I'm thinking of an actual case history that we had where the man made it through the marriage. Everything was just fine. His wife got pregnant and he disappeared. In this particular case, I don't think they've ever found him. She went ahead, got a job, made the money, paid for the baby. This is awful. She's assuming all the responsibilities. Because when you really think it's bad, and you can't assume the responsibility anymore, and you run, somebody half as big as you walks in and does a beautiful job. Because when you do run, are the responsibilities still there? Someone's got to do them. Someone's going to have to take over. Now, when I describe something as a basic instinct, as a need for headship, and you don't feel it tonight, are we talking about perversion? Anytime there's a thwarting of a natural instinct, then we call that perversion. The mother who leaves her baby on the doorstep, do we say that she has a natural instinct that's thwarted? I don't care if it's illegitimate or not. That doesn't change the fact it's still human, it's still a baby. Then we say, is that perversion? Definitely. So, all right, I'll tell you what number 7 is. Actual need deep down within him for headship. In other words, he has an actual craving, a desire, a part of his very being to be over something, to take charge of something. In other words, actual headship. By the way, another way to say this, does this mean that he craves responsibility?